Sarah saw the world through the golden reflection of the Christmas lights scattered across the cold marble of the lobby. With each step, she smelled the familiar and comforting scent of cinnamon, mixed with the intense aroma of freshly brewed coffee, both emanating from some forgotten office beyond the glass door. The wide corridors were silent, interrupted only by the tinkling of a distant bell and the soft creaking of her boots on the carpet, marking her presence in places no one would see that night. It was strange to imagine that, on the eve of the most luminous party of the year, under the slowly falling snow outside, she would be alone with her broom and the key to the top floor, except for the CEO, who until then was just a name in printed letters on the main door. The old note from the previous message, forgotten on his desk, scraped against Sarah's palm as she put things back in order. There were cup stains, and next to them, a black knitted wool pen stuck to the side, forgotten amidst the hurried work. She hesitated as she entered, wondering if that man, James the CEO, worked late, or if he trusted that the empty building would never betray his secrets. With discreet movements, she brushed dust from under the lampshade, feeling the smooth texture of the paper on her fingertips as she guided each object back to its place. The silence was so absolute that she could hear her own thoughts tracing their lines in the snow. James appeared suddenly, materializing beside the table. He wasn't too tall or young. He had silver strands in his hair and an expression that mixed curiosity and reserve. He looked at Sarah as if searching for something specific but didn't ask anything immediately. He just stood there, watching her hands retrieve a forgotten book from the floor. Sarah noticed an unusual detail. There was a small scar on the back of his hand, subtle, visible only under the golden light of the lamp. The soft scent of pine came with him, mixed with the smell of old paper. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," James said in a deep, almost gentle voice, breaking the silence without haste. Sarah smiled slightly, unable to respond quickly. It was one of the rare times I'd felt like staying in a room longer than the job required. "I like this time of day, you know," she said, pausing for a moment before continuing. "It feels like the whole city calms down, and the world makes room for silence." James agreed, but looked away, pushing aside a picture frame. He seemed to want to say something, but the moment drifted between them without a response. Sarah noticed he left a note on the edge of the table, discreet and written in firm handwriting. "For someone who makes this night feel less empty." She didn't know whether she should thank him. Her hands trembled as she picked up the old paper and put it away with her belongings, as if touching a silent promise. In the hallway, Sarah heard the wind pass by, carrying with it the question that lingered in the air. Why would someone so important write something like that, expecting nothing in return? She continued on her way, feeling the texture of the wool on her coat, the Christmas lights reflected in the glass, and a growing curiosity occupying the space where before there had only been routine. Before we continue, a heartfelt request. Please subscribe to the channel. I would be very grateful for your support. Sarah hadn't expected to return the following night with her heart racing. The note remained tucked away in her bag, carefully folded, as if it were too fragile to be exposed to the light of day. She mentally repeated the words, "For someone who makes this night feel less empty," trying to decipher what they truly meant. Was it just kindness? Or was there something deeper hidden in that firm, slanted handwriting? The building was equally silent, but this time Sarah noticed that James's office door was ajar. The golden light from the lamp spilled down the hallway, creating elongated shadows that danced on the walls. She hesitated, gripping the cleaning card tighter than necessary. Part of her wanted to walk straight past, pretend she hadn't noticed. The other part, the one that had awakened after years of slumber, pushed her forward. He was sitting at the table, but he wasn't working. He was just looking out the window, watching the snowflakes spiral down under the city lights. There was a half-empty cup of coffee beside him, and the scent of cinnamon filled the room with a comforting familiarity. Sarah knocked lightly on the door, breaking the silence with an almost inaudible sound. James turned, and something changed in his expression when he saw her. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition, as if he had been expecting her. "You're back," he said, and there was a quiet relief in his voice that Sarah couldn't ignore. "I work here every night," she replied, trying to keep her tone light, but feeling that the words carried more weight than she intended. I know. James stood up, approaching slowly, keeping a distance. But yesterday, I didn't know if you would understand the note, or if you would find it strange. Sarah could still feel the texture of the old paper in her hands. She could lie, say it meant nothing, but something in the way he looked at her, unhurried, without expectation, just genuine curiosity, prevented her from hiding the truth. I understand, she said, lowering her gaze to her own hands. And it was kind. It's been a long time since someone noticed me. James nodded, as if those words confirmed something he already suspected. He pulled up a chair, offering it with a discreet gesture, and Sarah, surprising herself, accepted. She sat on the edge, still clutching the strap of her bag as if she needed an anchor. I work late because it's easier than going home, James said, breaking the silence with an honesty Sarah hadn't expected. The house is full of things, but empty of presence. Do you understand that? Sarah understood more than he had imagined. That feeling of walking through rooms that once had life, but were now just spaces filled with memories. She nodded, feeling a lump in her throat that she couldn't hide. My husband died 4 years ago, Sarah said, and the words came out more easily than she expected. I still make too much coffee in the morning. I still expect to hear the door open when I get home. James didn't look away. He didn't offer empty condolences or rehearsed words. He simply stood there, listening. And Sarah felt that this was more valuable than any comforting phrase. I got divorced 6 years ago, he said, pausing as if measuring each word. Not because we didn't love each other, but because we forgot how to do it while building careers and expectations. When I realized it, it was too late. Sarah looked at the scar on his hand, now more visible in the light. She wondered what other marks he carried, invisible to the eye, but imprinted in the way he spoke and moved. Do you regret it? She asked, without knowing why that question mattered so much. James thought for a long moment, watching the snowflakes that continued to fall outside. I regret not fighting harder, but I also learned that sometimes people aren't ready to meet at the same time. He paused, then added, almost in a whisper, until they are. Sarah felt something shift inside her. It wasn't butterflies or electricity. It was something quieter and deeper. Possibility. The idea that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry loneliness as a permanent sentence. James picked up a small notebook from the table and quickly wrote something down. He carefully tore out the page and handed it to Sarah. She accepted it, feeling the rough texture of the paper under her fingers. My number, he said simply. If you want to talk. Or just not be alone. Sarah tucked the paper away with the previous note, feeling their weight together in her bag. She stood up slowly, realizing she needed to leave before she said something she wasn't ready to admit yet. Thank you, she said, and the words seemed insufficient to express everything she felt at that moment. When Sarah left the office, the hallway seemed less empty. The scent of pine and cinnamon followed her to the door, and she found herself smiling for no apparent reason. But one question lingered in the air, still unanswered. Why would someone like James, who could have chosen any company, choose to stay there, waiting for her? Sarah didn't call. She kept the number for 3 days, looking at it every morning before leaving for work, touching the paper with her fingertips as if she could absorb courage through its rough texture. Every night in the building, she cleaned the floors with the same dedication as always, but avoided the top floor, where his office was. It was safer to keep her distance, more sensible to protect her heart, which was only beginning to remember how to beat differently. But on the 4th night, as the snow fell heaviest and the wind howled against the high windows, Sarah found another note. This time, it was pinned to the cleaning closet door, written in the same firm handwriting. Hot coffee in my office. No strings attached. Just company. Sarah climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of each step under her boots. The hallway on the top floor was lit only by the Christmas lights James had hung. Small, golden ones, creating a path to the half-open door. She stopped in the doorway, watching him through the crack. He wasn't working. He was standing near the window, holding a cup in both hands, looking out at the white-covered city below. You came, he said, without turning around, as if he sensed her presence in the air. Sarah entered, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the aroma of pine filled the room, enveloping her like a silent embrace. "I almost didn't come," she admitted, accepting the cup he offered. The porcelain was warm in her cold hands, and Sarah wondered how long he had waited there, keeping the coffee warm. "But you came," James said, and there was gratitude in his voice. "That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee while the snow continued to fall. Sarah noticed that James had a picture frame upside down on the table, something she hadn't noticed before. Curiosity consumed her, but she didn't ask. She knew that certain secrets needed to be offered, not taken. "Do you have children?" James asked, breaking the silence gently. Sarah shook her head, feeling the familiar pain that always accompanied that answer. "We tried, for years." She paused, measuring her words. "But it didn't work. And then, he died, before we could try again." James nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. He took a long sip of his coffee before speaking. "I have a daughter, 23 years old. She lives in California." There was something unspoken in the way he pronounced those words, a weight hidden between the lines. "She hasn't spoken to me in 2 years." Sarah felt her heart clench. She looked at the upside-down picture frame and understood. "Because of the divorce?" James nodded, but didn't elaborate immediately. He slowly turned the picture frame, revealing a photo of a young woman with dark hair and a radiant smile, embracing him on graduation day. The resemblance between father and daughter was evident in their eyes. Both had that look that blended strength and vulnerability. "She blames me. She thinks I gave up on my family because of work." James touched the edge of the picture frame carefully, as if touching something sacred. "And maybe she's right. I was so obsessed with building something bigger that I forgot to protect what I already had." Sarah placed the cup on the table and, without much thought, reached out, briefly touching his arm. It was a small gesture, but full of intention, a way of saying she understood the pain of losing someone who was still alive. "Have you tried talking to her? Every month, I leave messages. I send letters." James smiled sadly. "She doesn't reply. And I don't blame her. I've learned that sometimes people need time to forgive, even when that time seems endless." Sarah withdrew her hand, still feeling the woolen texture of his coat on her fingertips. She looked out the window, watching the snowflakes swirling in the yellowish light of the streetlights. "My husband's name was David," she said, pronouncing the name for the first time in months. "He was a history teacher. He loved telling the same bad jokes over and over again." Sarah smiled, feeling tears burn in her eyes but not letting them fall. "He died of a heart attack. It was quick. No warnings, no goodbyes." James turned completely to face her, listening attentively. "I spent 2 years waiting to wake up and find out it had been a nightmare." Sarah took a deep breath, letting the words flow. "And then I realized that life went on, even when I didn't want it to. The bills came, the world kept turning, people laughed, and I felt guilty every time I smiled." "Do you still feel guilty?" James asked, and the question was so direct that Sarah needed a moment to process it. "Yes," she admitted finally, "especially now." James frowned, confused. "Why now?" Sarah looked at him, feeling the weight of the truth about to be spoken. "Because I'm here, because I accepted the coffee. Because I saved your number and thought about calling every night." She paused, feeling her hands tremble. "Because when I'm near you, I don't think about him, and that scares me." The silence that followed was dense, heavy with unspoken things. James didn't look away, didn't offer easy answers. He simply stood there, present, letting Sarah feel what she needed to feel. "I don't want you to forget him," James said finally, his voice low but firm. "He was part of who you are." "But Sarah," he hesitated, as if measuring each word, "you're still here. You still breathe. You still feel. You deserve to be happy again, even if it seems wrong at first." Sarah felt a tear escape, sliding slowly down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, embarrassed, but James simply offered her a clean handkerchief, without making a fuss. "And you?" Sarah asked, turning the table over. "Do you allow yourself to be happy?" James smiled sadly, looking at his daughter's photo. "I'm trying. For the first time in years, I'm trying." They sat longer, talking about small things, favorite books, songs that brought back memories, places they'd like to visit but had never been. Sarah realized she hadn't laughed like that in years, so lightly and without guilt. And when she finally got up to leave, James walked her to the door. "Tomorrow is Christmas Eve," he said, pausing before continuing. "The building closes. There will be no work." Sarah nodded, feeling a strange emptiness as she imagined a night without that encounter. "But," James continued, and there was nervousness in his voice, "I'll be at the coffee shop on the corner. 7 o'clock tonight, if you want, just to be there." Sarah kept that information as carefully as she had kept the tickets, like something precious. She made no promises, just smiled and went down the stairs, feeling her heart beat faster with each step. When she got home, Sarah took David's picture frame off the shelf. She looked at it for a long time, memorizing the smile she had once known so well. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered to the photo, "but I think you'd understand." And for the first time, she felt that perhaps David was saying yes. Sarah arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes late, her hair damp with snow and her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples. She stopped outside, peering through the fogged-up window. James was sitting at a table near the fireplace with 2 cups in front of him, one still full, waiting. He glanced at the door every few seconds, and Sarah realized he was nervous too. She almost gave up. She almost turned her back and returned to the safety of familiar solitude. But then James saw her through the glass, and the smile that lit up his face was so genuine, so full of relief, that Sarah couldn't do anything but push the door open and go inside. The warmth of the cafe enveloped her immediately, mingling with the aroma of hot chocolate and cinnamon. Soft Christmas music played in the background, and the golden lights created an atmosphere that seemed straight out of an old movie. Sarah walked to the table, removing her wet scarf as James stood up to greet her. "I thought you weren't coming," he said, and the honesty in his voice completely disarmed her. "I thought so too," Sarah admitted, sitting down and accepting the still warm cup. Hot chocolate with melted marshmallows on top. Exactly how she liked it, though she'd never told him. "A lucky shot," James said, noticing her surprised look. Or hope. They drank in comfortable silence for a few minutes, simply enjoying each other's presence. Sarah observed details she hadn't noticed before. The way James held the cup carefully, as if afraid of breaking it. The small scar on his hand that she already knew. His tired but gentle eyes, which held untold stories. "My sister called today," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "She invited me to spend Christmas with her and her family." James nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I refused, like I do every year." Sarah stirred the chocolate, watching the marshmallows melt. "She thinks it's because I'm still grieving. But the truth is, I can't stand seeing happy couples, complete families, everything I should have and don't. And now?" James asked softly. "Is that still the reason?" Sarah pondered the question for a long moment. She looked at James, feeling something shift inside her. "Now it's because I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if I say yes to them, I'll be saying yes to moving on. And if I move on, you're betraying his memory," James finished, and Sarah nodded, feeling tears threatening to well up again. James placed the cup on the table and leaned slightly forward, searching her eyes. "Can I tell you something my mother told me when I got divorced?" Sarah nodded, gripping the cup tighter. She said, "James, love isn't a finite resource. You don't exhaust your capacity to love by loving again. You just expand it." He paused, letting the words sink in. "At the time, I didn't understand. I thought it was just motherly nonsense trying to console me. But now you understand," Sarah said, finishing the sentence for him. "Now I know she was right." James took a deep breath. "My marriage ended, but the love I felt was real. My daughter doesn't speak to me, but my love for her hasn't diminished. And you?" He hesitated, as if treading on delicate ground. "You loved your husband deeply. That will never change. But Sarah, you still have so much love inside you. So much to give." Sarah felt the first tear fall, and this time she didn't try to hide it. She let it flow freely, mingling with the melted snow that still dripped from her hair. I don't know if I can, she whispered. I don't know if I'm strong enough. James reached across the table, stopping just inches from hers. An offer, not an imposition. Sarah looked at that hand, at the scar that told stories of healed wounds, and slowly placed hers on top of it. The touch was simple, chaste, but it carried the weight of everything they couldn't yet say. You're the strongest person I've ever met, James said, and there was absolute conviction in his voice. But you don't have to be strong alone. They remained like that for a moment that seemed suspended in time, hands intertwined on the worn wooden table, while the snow continued to fall outside, and Christmas carols filled the silence. But then James's phone vibrated, breaking the spell. He checked the screen and Sarah saw something change in his expression. Surprise mixed with fear. It's her, he said in a hoarse voice. My daughter. She's calling me. Sarah immediately withdrew her hand, giving him space. James stared at the phone as if he were holding a grenade about to explode, unsure whether to answer or let it ring. Answer it, Sarah said gently. You need to answer it. James nodded, standing up and moving to a quieter corner of the coffee shop. Sarah watched as he served her, seeing his posture change completely. Back hunched, free hand covering his face, breathing heavily. She couldn't hear his words, but she saw the emotion streaming through his every gesture. The connection lasted less than 3 minutes. When James returned to the table, he had tears in his eyes and a smile Sarah had never seen before. Pure, vulnerable, full of hope and pain at the same time. He paused to catch his breath. She said she missed me, that she's thinking of coming to visit me for New Year's. Sarah instinctively stood up and, without thinking, hugged him. It was a brief but intense hug, and when they pulled away, they were both trembling. Not from cold, but from something much bigger that they couldn't yet name. I need to go, James said suddenly. I need to call back, confirm the dates, talk to her while she's still willing to talk. Sarah understood perfectly. She nodded, picking up her scarf. Sure, go ahead. But when James was almost at the door, he turned around abruptly. Tomorrow. Christmas. The words tumbled out, urgent. I know it's early and I know you're scared, but Sarah, spend Christmas with me. Just the two of us. No pressure, no expectations. Just don't be alone. Sarah opened her mouth to reply, but James had already left, disappearing into the increasingly heavy snowfall. She stood there, clutching her scarf to her chest, the invitation echoing in her mind. Spending Christmas with him would mean crossing a line. It would mean admitting there was something between them beyond shared loneliness. It would mean choosing possibility over security. Sarah walked home through the streets covered in white, thinking of David, of James, of everything she had lost and everything she might still find. And when she arrived, she picked up her phone and typed a simple message to the number she had saved for days. Yes, he sent it before he could change his mind. And then he waited, feeling his heart race with each passing second without a reply. James's reply came 3 minutes later. 7 o'clock at night, my house. I'll send you the address. Thank you for saying yes. Sarah spent the entire Christmas day alternating between panic and anticipation. She changed her outfit 4 times, trying on dresses she hadn't worn in years until finally choosing something simple. A dark green wool sweater and dark trousers. Nothing extravagant, nothing that looked like she was trying too hard. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. A woman who was still alive. James's house was in a quiet neighborhood, with old trees lining the sidewalks and Christmas lights hanging from every porch. Sarah parked out front, observing the house through the fogged windshield. It was smaller than she had imagined, cozy, with exposed brick and a red door weathered by time. Smoke rose from the chimney, drawing spirals against the dark sky. She almost started the car again and drove away, but the door opened before she could decide, and James appeared in the doorway, illuminated by the golden light streaming from inside. He waved, smiling with that mixture of nervousness and hope that Sarah knew so well. She took a deep breath, picked up the bottle of wine she had brought, and got out of the car. You came, James said when she reached the door, and Sarah realized that those words had become a kind of ritual between them. I came, she replied, and this time it sounded like a promise. The house was exactly as Sarah had imagined, full of books, dark wood furniture, a crackling fireplace. The smell of roast turkey mixed with the aroma of rosemary filled the air. But what caught her attention most was the Christmas tree in the corner of the room. Small, irregularly decorated, with ornaments that clearly had stories to tell. "I know it's not perfect," James said, following her gaze, "but I wanted to do something special. It's been years since I decorated a tree." Sarah approached, touching a handmade ornament that looked like it had been made by children's hands. It read, "For the best dad in the world," in uneven letters. "Did your daughter do this?" James nodded, his emotion showing in his voice. "When I was 7 years old. I've kept it ever since." Sarah felt her heart clench, understanding the weight of that ornament hanging there, alone among so many other anonymous ones. It was a physical reminder of everything James had lost and still hoped to regain. They dined leisurely, talking about things that mattered. Dreams they had abandoned, fears they still carried, small joys they had learned to recognize again. James recounted his conversation with his daughter, savoring each detail as something precious. Sarah spoke of David, but this time without the paralyzing pain, only with the gentle melancholy of someone who has learned to cherish memories without drowning in them. When they finished eating, they moved into the living room, sitting on the sofa near the fireplace. James served hot chocolate, the same one they had shared in the coffee shop, and Sarah accepted with a smile that said more than words could express. "Can I ask you a question?" Sarah said after a long, comfortable silence. "Anything." "Why me?" The question came out more vulnerable than Sarah intended. "You could be with anyone tonight. Why did you choose to spend Christmas with a lonely widow who cleans offices?" James put the cup down and turned completely to face her, searching her eyes intently. "Because when I look at you, I see courage. I see someone who faces pain every day and still chooses to get up." He paused, as if measuring each word. "And because when I'm near you, I don't feel alone. For the first time in years, I feel I can be vulnerable without being weak." Sarah felt tears burning, but she didn't let them fall. She reached out and gently touched his face. A small gesture, but one laden with meaning. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "Scared that this is real. Scared that it isn't. Scared that I won't know how to do this anymore." James covered her hand with his, holding it against her face. "I'm scared too." The admission was raw, honest. "I'm scared of messing everything up. Of not being good enough, of losing you before I even have you." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked, feeling like she was on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to jump or retreat. James leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Sarah didn't move away. She let him close the distance until their faces were inches apart, feeling the warmth of his breath, the scent of chocolate and hope. "We chose," James said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "We chose to try. We chose to take the risk. We chose not to let fear decide for us." And then he kissed her. It was a gentle, almost shy kiss, nothing urgent or rushed. It was a kiss that spoke of unspoken promises, of shared vulnerabilities, of two hearts learning again how to beat in sync. Sarah felt the whole world disappear, leaving only that moment, that feeling of finally being home after years of being lost. When they pulled away, they were both trembling. Sarah rested her forehead against his, closing her eyes and simply breathing, allowing herself to feel everything she had repressed for so long. "I don't know if this will work," she said honestly. "I don't even know how to do this anymore." "Nobody knows," James replied, cupping her face in his hands. "But Sarah, I want to try. I want to wake up every day and choose you. I want to know every piece of your story, even the painful parts. I want to build something new without erasing what came before." Sarah looked at him, seeing not just the man before her, but everything he represented. Possibility, hope, a second chance she thought she'd never have again. "And your daughter?" she asked, because she needed to know. "When she comes back, when things change, then we'll face it together," James said with absolute conviction. "If you want. If you'll let me be by your side." Sarah felt something break inside her, not painfully but liberatingly. It was the last barrier falling, the last defense being disarmed. She had spent years building walls to protect her wounded heart, but now, looking at James, she realized she no longer wanted to live behind them. "Yes," she said, and the word carried the weight of all the choices she had made to get to that point. "Yes, I want to try." James pulled her into a hug that seemed to encompass not just bodies, but souls. They stayed like that for a long time, lulled by the crackling of the fireplace and the certainty that, despite all their fears and uncertainties, they had found something rare and precious. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world with a white blanket. And inside that small, cozy house, two people who had forgotten how to love were rediscovering it together. Sarah looked at the tree ornament, for the best dad in the world, and felt hope blossom. Maybe broken stories could be mended. Maybe wounded hearts could learn to beat again. Maybe it wasn't too late to start over. But one question still lingered in the air, unspoken but ever present. What would it be like to wake up the next day, knowing that everything had changed? Sarah woke up the next day with sunlight flooding her room, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she'd dreamt it all. But then she saw the dark green sweater thrown over the chair, tasted the phantom flavor of hot chocolate on her lips, and knew it had been real. Every second, every word, every kiss, all real. She picked up her phone and saw 3 messages from James, sent during the early hours of the morning. "I can't stop thinking about you. I'm sorry if this is too intense, but I needed you to know. Good morning, Sarah. I hope you slept well." She smiled, feeling her heart race in a way she'd forgotten was possible. She typed a simple reply. "Good morning. I haven't stopped thinking either." The answer came immediately. "Can I see you today?" Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to dive headfirst into this new and frightening feeling. But the other part, the part that had learned to be cautious, knew they needed to talk. Really talk. Without the romantic veil of Christmas Eve, without the magic of the golden lights and falling snow. "Yes, but we need to talk about what that means." "I know. Shall we have lunch?" "I know a quiet place." The restaurant James chose was away from the center, a small bistro with wooden tables and large windows that let in natural light. When Sarah arrived, he was already there, wearing a navy blue sweater that made his eyes seem even more intense. He stood up when he saw her, and for a moment they stood there, unsure exactly how to greet each other now that everything had changed. James resolved the issue by gently pulling her into a brief but warm embrace, then tenderly kissing her forehead. It was such a natural, such a right gesture that Sarah felt her last defenses dissolve. They sat down and ordered their food, but neither of them was really interested in eating. There were too many things that needed to be said. "I spoke with my sister this morning," Sarah began, interlacing her fingers on the table. "I told her about you." James blinked, surprised. "What did you say?" "That I met someone. Someone who makes me want to wake up and face the day again." Sarah took a deep breath. She was happy and scared for me, both at the same time. "And you?" James asked. "How are you feeling?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "Terrified, but also alive. For the first time in 4 years, I feel like I'm living instead of just existing." James reached for her hand on the table, intertwining his fingers with hers. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I'm scared of messing this up, of not being what you need, of my baggage being too heavy." "We all have baggage," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "The question is whether we're willing to carry each other's." James smiled, but there was seriousness in his eyes. "Sarah, I need you to know that this isn't a fling for me. I'm not looking for something casual to pass the time." He paused, weighing his words. "I'm too old for games. If we're going to do this, I want to do it right." Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes, but they were good tears. Tears of relief, of gratitude. "Me too, but James, I need time. I need to take it slow." She looked at him, vulnerable. "Not because I don't feel anything, but because I feel too much, too fast, and that scares me." "Then let's take it slow," James said immediately. "At your own pace. No pressure, no impossible expectations. Just the two of us figuring it out together." Sarah nodded, feeling a huge weight lift from her shoulders. They had lunch talking about practical things, how to divide their time between their individual lives and moments together, how to introduce each other to important people, how to navigate the complexities of two hearts that had already loved and lost. When they finished, James walked her to the car. The previous day's snow had turned to mud on the streets, but the sky was clear and blue, promising a fresh start. "Sarah," James called as she was about to get into the car. She turned and he was there, so close she could see the strands of silver mixed into his hair. The scar on his hand she already knew by heart. "Thank you," he said, simply and sincerely, "for choosing to try, for not giving up before you even started, for letting me get to know you." Sarah touched his face gently, memorizing every detail of that moment. "Thank you," she whispered, "for reminding me that there is still beauty in the world, that there is still room for love, even when we think there is none left." They kissed there, in the empty parking lot, under the blue winter sky. It was different from the kiss of the night before, less hesitant, more certain, a promise sealed without words. When they parted ways, they were both smiling. "Tomorrow?" James asked hopefully. "Tomorrow," Sarah confirmed. She drove home with a lighter heart than she had felt in years. Upon arriving, she went straight to the shelf where she kept David's framed photograph. She picked it up carefully, gazing at the face she had once loved more than anything. "I'm moving on," she said aloud, letting the tears flow freely. "But I'll never forget you. You made me who I am. And I think you would like him. I think you'd like to know that I can still be happy." He put the picture frame back on the shelf, but this time not in its usual spot. He placed it next to an empty space for new moments, new memories, a new life. That night, before going to sleep, Sarah received another message from James. "Good night, sleep well, and thank you for being exactly who you are." She smiled in the dark, typing back, "Good night, James. See you tomorrow." And for the first time in 4 years, Sarah slept without nightmares. She dreamed of falling snow, golden lights, and the promise of better days to come. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the airport beside James, watching the passengers emerge from the arrival gate. He held her hand tightly, not out of nervousness, but out of gratitude for not facing that moment alone. And then she appeared. James's daughter looked exactly like her picture. Dark hair, intense eyes that held the same depth as her father's. But there was uncertainty in her posture, hesitation in her steps, as if she wasn't yet sure she had made the right decision. James let go of Sarah's hand and walked over to her. For a moment, father and daughter stood still, staring at each other, years of silence weighing heavily between them. Then she dropped her suitcase and threw herself into his arms, and Sarah watched James crumble, but in the most beautiful way possible, holding his daughter as if he feared she would disappear if he let go. Sarah stayed behind, giving them space, feeling tears of happiness stream down her face. This wasn't about her. It was about healing, about forgiveness, about second chances. But then the daughter turned away from James and looked at Sarah. She walked slowly toward her, extending her hand. "You must be Sarah. My father never stops talking about you." Sarah squeezed her hand, surprised by how firm the grip was. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. He told me," the daughter paused, choosing her words carefully, "that you taught him to forgive himself, that you helped him realize that it's never too late to start over." Sarah looked at James, who was watching the two of them with transparent emotion on his face. "He did the same for me," Sarah said honestly. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were difficult conversations, tears, moments when the past threatened to swallow the present. But Sarah and James faced it all together, building something new without erasing what came before, honoring memories while creating new ones. The following Christmas, Sarah was at James's house again, but this time they weren't alone. His daughter was there along with Sarah's sister and her family. The tree was fuller, decorated with new ornaments alongside the old ones, including one that read, "For the best dad in the world." James pulled Sarah closer to the fireplace, away from the others for a moment. "Thank you," he said, kissing her forehead gently. "For what reason?" "For letting me love you. For having the courage to love again." for proving that happy endings still exist, even when we think we don't deserve them. Sarah looked around, at the house full of people they loved, at the life they had built together, at the future that finally seemed bright. "These aren't happy endings," she said, smiling. "They're happy beginnings, and we're only just getting started." Outside, the snow began to fall again, covering the world with endless possibilities. And inside that house, two hearts that had forgotten how to beat learned not only to love again, but to blossom. If this story moved you, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories of overcoming challenges, forgiveness, and true love. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and together we'll transform stories into real inspiration. See you in the next video. And remember, this Christmas, even a weary heart deserves rest, renewed hope, and a love that will last.